Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long. We're going Arizona, Georgia Tech, Maryland.
Yeah.
I have Arizona, you have Georgia Tech. Arizona in 2014 won more than 8 games. They ended up in the Pac-12 championship game, got demolished by Oregon, a team, though, they had beaten earlier on in the season. Oregon went on to go to the national championship game, Heisman winning quarterback. But Arizona, Anu Solomon, if you remember that name,
I do.
A future Baylor transfer. Have had big names in the desert since they have Rich Rod, Kevin Sumlin, now Jedd Fisch, not a huge name, but successful on offense this past year. And the question is, Arizona as an athletic department has had very successful teams. The basketball team is the headline program on that campus.
Basketball school, Dan. We've heard that before.
Basketball school, of course. Lute Olson, all sorts of huge names coming through Arizona. Mike Bibby, as you know.
Bibby, yeah.
We're talking about a program that has had some downtimes. Kevin Sumlin kind of drove it into the ground. And the hiring of Jedd Fisch, I think, was met with a lot of enthusiasm. And they went 5-7 last season. They had the number one most explosive, or the explosive play rate on offense was the best in the country. There was a lot of positives to take away. They've hit the portal hard. They have a quarterback of the future. There's a lot to like about Arizona, and they played some really close. They beat UCLA. They played some close teams, close games against good teams, decent teams. Didn't make a bowl game, but things appear to be heading in the correct direction. And so what I'm going to say is there's very little reason right now, today, in early May, that Arizona can't be flirting with 8 wins every year. My question to you is, I think, a broader question, and that's not just relevant to Arizona's interests or Georgia Tech or Maryland or any of these teams' interests. It's, what is the difference between a team that wins 5 or 6 games and 8 games? Usually it's, well, you want better players, you want more better players. But generally speaking, it comes down to winning very small moments. It's, not going 3 and out on your first 3 drives in a game. Or when you have the opportunity, down 3 late, don't commit a back-breaking holding penalty from your right guard or whatever, or a back-breaking, pass interference penalty or something like that extends a drive, and then that team scores, right? It's the little things. It's that combination, the aggregate of a ton of little things. On 4th and 3 from your own 48, don't punt it when it's a back-and-forth offensive game, right? It's those decisions that ultimately are the difference between either making a bowl and not making a bowl, or you lose a bunch of close games, and those are the difference between, those L's and W's. And that was true of Arizona, who had an opportunity to win more games last year. When you look at the way they lost the Washington game, the way that they lost the Wazoo game, the way that they lost the USC game, these games were not catastrophically out of hand. They were up against Cal at half, and Jedd just exploded. I mean, He exploded all game long. He ran for damn near 300 yards. But Arizona's defense has been catastrophic. Didn't change much last year, though it wasn't always the problem. And so for me, for Arizona, it's, okay, Jedd Fisch has an offensive background. He has a quarterback of the future. He's been able to recruit and develop offensive skill guys. The offense should be in pretty good hands, despite some transfers, whatever. They lose, Dorian Singer to USC, a promising young receiver. But the offense appears like it's on track to be successful in the short term. So the question is, how do you fill out a defense? Is it a strategy thing? They've hit the portal hard for front 7 guys, from big places. Now it's a question of, how do we get from being catastrophically bad on defense to frisky? 83rd best defense in the country instead of 124th or something like that. And so I don't think the conference situation is great. We don't know where Arizona is going to be long term as we await Pac-12 TV stuff. But the way that Arizona is recruited, the way that stadium can be, it can be a rowdy place. I see no reason that Arizona in the next 2 or 3 years that they can't win 8 games. I'm just not so super sold on the teams around them in the conference, with ASU starting over with a new coach, with UCLA kind of already in that 8-win mold, but not crazy dangerous all the time, with the Bay Area schools, with the conference going divisionless, with Colorado needing some time. I'm still high on Arizona if those decisions, Jayden DeLora has a 4-interception game randomly against, I think, Wazoo. He's just like, if they are winning moments more often, they're winning 7-8 games to me. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, 2 to 3 years, sure. I don't know about this coming year.
I see 7 as totally doable this year, which is 2 more than 5.
This looks like a tough schedule to me.
Okay.
This year. I feel like a good number of the teams, not all of the teams, but a good number of the teams in this schedule are better. I think Oregon State is better.
But where's that game?
The game is in Arizona.
Yeah. It's where,
which is helpful.
It's Tucson, much like we talked about last year with Syracuse,
it's a weird
or a
place.
couple of years ago. It's where good teams go to die. It just is.
I get it. But I'm just looking at this thing and I'm saying, all right, well, you've got some duds, some winnable games. You've got Stanford, that's probably winnable. Northern Arizona, that's winnable. Sure. Colorado, more than winnable. Probably even Arizona State. Winnable. But there's a game against Utah. They should be pretty good. UCLA should be pretty good. Oregon State is improved. Washington State, I'm not sure, but that game is in Pullman, right? USC, Washington, at Mississippi State. There are a lot of landmines on the schedule. Yeah. And so what I fear, just in terms of wins and losses, I think you're right on with respect to the talent and the coaching staff. And just in general, there are good vibes around the Arizona program. It feels like things are moving with a good sense of momentum towards something greater. So I agree that 2 to 3 years feels like it's doable. But in the short term here, I fear that this is a team that could statistically improve, but in terms of wins and losses, that they might not get back to where they were a year ago. Sure. Five wins is probably doable, but there's a chance it could only get to 4 because of what I'm seeing here.
Totally.
And I think that will be a bit of a mirage. I hope people don't read too deeply into that because I like what Jedd Fisch has done.
Yeah, look, there's talent on the roster, and I'm still willing to say that, and this is true of both Arizona schools, to be clear, that in the portal era, what you can do in terms of picking off decent players along the West Coast or even the Midwest, or even looking east to Texas or wherever, that this is a landing spot where you can focus on football. Again, true of both ASU and Arizona, though Tucson's a little bit more removed, than Tempe. That you can fill in gaps. It's a portal destination in the way that a lot of schools aren't necessarily. That, this is warm down here. Oh, people are just sort of happy to be here, right? And so I am good with the possibility of, Arizona adds Justin Flo, who did not live up to his 5-star status at Oregon. He struggled at times to sort of pick up the defense and pick up receivers in pass coverage. But fresh start for a lot of these guys. They added a top tier former blue chip defensive lineman from Georgia. His name's Bill, which I always appreciate.
Big Bill. Yeah.
Big Bill. I can appreciate that Arizona is a place that, look, academics aren't going to keep you away from transferring you there, right? I'm good with it. I'm good with Arizona being a bigger, brighter landing spot in this new area. You're from San Diego State and you want to go up a level. You want, like, that kind of thing, I think, is meaningful. And so I think Jedd Fisch is going to continue to be aggressive in building this roster into something dangerous. Because, look, who wants to play in Tucson at 11 p.m. Eastern? Not many teams. So, I don't know. I'm in.
A weird non-conference matchup that I found on the Arizona front. Starting next year, they've got a home-and-home with K-State.
Yep.
Like week 2, week 3 of the college football season, which is a non-traditional matchup, but I think will be very interesting. 2 programs that, are kind of in different spots. We just talked about Chris Kleiman, but I like what Arizona's doing. I do. I think they're on the right path. And as the Pac-12 takes on a new form in the absence of both USC and UCLA, again, we don't know the long-term viability of the conference. That's probably a separate discussion.
Sure.
But Arizona is one of those teams that at least feels like it's headed in the right direction. And that in and of itself is promising.
Yeah. I'd give them, in terms of winning 8 games, regular season games, so we're talking 8-4, 2 out of 3 years, I'd say there's a 38% chance of it happening in the way that the Pac-10 will be, if in that universe in which it's a Pac-10 as currently constituted. Sure. I think 3 or 4 out of 10 universes will have Arizona winning 8 games more often than not, in terms of where the trajectory is today in early May.
I think that sounds right, Dan.
Yeah.
That sounds right to me. So you're bullish on
I think so.
Arizona long term.
I think there's buy-in within the program. I think there's recruiting momentum, and you mentioned this season specifically. I sort of saw 7 there if things break correctly and they win those bigger moments. Mississippi State's going to be a big wild card, obviously, for crazy, unfortunate reasons, starting over with the passing of Mike Leach. But no, in terms of what Arizona has going for it, I think the stonk is pointing upwards, Ty.
The over-under, by the way, is 5.5. We've got a whole series of over-under shows that we'll do a little bit later on this offseason when we've got more detail on who is transferring in, who is transferring out, that type of thing. But just for a reference point, 5.5 is your over-under.
Yeah. By the way, just totally brutal. I think they had it was like a 4th and goal at one point, or excuse me, like a 3rd and goal, like 3rd and 2 or 2nd and 2 or something. It had a back-breaking holding penalty. They're down 3 to Washington last year, and I want to say it was a defensive holding on 3rd and 11 that extended a drive from their own 29 or something.
Brutal.
So, yeah, and those are those moments, right? And then those are the moments late, and then it's the moments early where it's just like the first 3 drives, they had -6 total yards. And it was like Arizona, if there's something I can very specifically prescribe to win more games immediately, it's be ready to move the ball early in both the first and second halves, and good things happen. Because eventually they got going basically against everybody offensively. It was coming out and stalling in the first half or coming out and stalling in the second half. You're like, that's backbreaking, right? When you have so little margin of error to play with because of your defense, offense has to be well-oiled machine immediately.